Welcome to Storytime, brought to you by the OWSCyCon2019, the online book event of the year. Ylaine slowed as she wove her way through the tunnel. The vial of potion glittered so that she could see various heaps of things like pearls and sea gems scattered over the floor of the tunnel. Had she known that such practices once occurred, she would have realized that this was an old smuggling tunnel used by some of the more self-interested mer traders, who would use it to reserve amounts of rare sea goods for trading, and also to reach the surface before the official delegations could make the journey through the open water. Just when Ylaine was beginning to wonder if this was such a good idea, and perhaps she ought to turn back, she saw the end of the darkness ahead. Her tail quivered as she swam into open water. The king's boundary was behind her. She was free. Ylaine looked up to the surface, just a few meters away. She now hovered on the far side of the island of Overcliff, where the rocky cliffs opened up to the stony beach and a series of wooden posts with boards upon them. Nayidia had said humans walked on these to be near the water, but staying out of it, since they could not be in the water without risk of drowning. Ylaine swam as far as the posts that supported the walkway. She figured she would be able to climb up quick enough. Her tail fluttered as she thought of what was to come. When she came free of the water, would she finally get to fly? Ylaine positioned herself just below one of the walking places. Bracing herself, she uncorked the bottle and poured a potion into her mouth. It blazed like the sting of a sea urchin all the way down her throat. As the potion entered her belly, Ylaine felt a strange feeling in her throat, as if her gills had suddenly seared shut. Water was coming in, but she could no longer breathe. Desperately, she shoved her face against the workplace, gasping the air above the water for the first time. But the potion had not finished. The stinging pain seemed to seep right past her stomach all the way down to her tail, and right down the middle of that to her fin. The potion cut her tail in two like a shark's bite, ripping into flesh and bone. Ylaine could not even scream as the long fin folded on itself, her spine twisting as length was lost. She felt the flexibility of her tail stiffening into rigid, jointed legs and feet. Frantically, she reached up and pulled her head above the water. Heaving, spewing, the former mermaid filled fresh lungs with gasps of real air. She clung to the post with her head barely above the water, taking quick gasps as she learned to use her new lungs. Something brushed her foot, she corrected herself, as she looked down to see a massive white object float to the surface. The dress! She recalled Nayidia mentioning that all humans wore clothes. Ylaine figured her godmother must have sent it up after her. The young former mermaid reached out her hand and pulled it towards herself. Keeping her legs wrapped around the post, she worked the dress into her body. Having done this, Ylaine gripped the walkway with her hands and gave a great heave. For the first time in more than a century, a mermaid rose completely out of the water and took her first tentative steps on land. On the road into town, Ylaine struggled to maintain her balance with only a tall pole for support. She was getting used to being dry, used to her hair hanging down her back instead of up around her head, and the fact that it was now the colour that her tail had been. As the sheen of water faded from her skin, Ylaine received her first major disappointment about life above water. Humans did not float. They apparently did not even leave the ground very easily, shuffling along on their feet to get around. To her intense disappointment, walking was not at all like floating. Her feet stuck to the ground in the most exaggerated manner, and her tall, bony body tilted precariously this way and that. If this were the water, Ylaine thought, I could just swim over the tops of these buildings till I saw the man I saved, and then dive right to him. However, the former mermaid could not, and had to merely trudge along. Each step sent a jolt through her delicate body. She figured she probably looked like such a dolt that she might not even have to worry about driving him away with her stutter. He'd see her coming and run of his own accord. The next cause for disappointment came soon after her first steps. The more she walked, the more she became disgusted with her human body. It was not smooth and streamlined like a mer person's body. A human woman's body, Ylaine decided, was lumpy. The arms, the chest, the legs, everything bulged with muscles. Even the face had a weird pointy blowhole. How could anyone think that this was beautiful at all? What kept the humans upright if they had all this terrible dragging weight to them? Look out, girl! The harsh cry grated over Ylane's ears, jerking her from the introspection. She shrieked as a large wagon pulled by a strange animal bore down upon her. The staff fell from her grasp as she stumbled out of its path. Splat! Ylaine felt like she was back in the sea as she landed head first in a cart full of fish. She flailed her arms, but the fish would not let her go. Unexpectedly, a human hand grabbed her and pulled her, bringing her up and out of the cart. Ylaine frowned to see that the fish had left stains and slime on her dress. Hello there, a voice laughed. Ylaine looked up. Her rescuer had dark hair and twinkling brown eyes. Could it be? Her eyes wandered as he smiled at her. Are you all right? That was quite a tumble. Yes, she stammered. Her cheeks burned to hear her dead, clumsy voice, the reminder of what she had given up. All hope of finding the man she sought slowly began to deflate inside her. This wasn't the way it was supposed to happen. This was obviously the wrong man. Now she wondered if it ever would. She turned and began to hobble away. In 3 strides the tall young human had caught up to her. "Have we met?" he asked abruptly. Ylaine didn't trust herself to speak, so she only shook her head. She was quite sure there was no possible way for him to have seen her anywhere on land. It couldn't be him, she reminded herself. He didn't look anything like the human she had rescued, and he didn't sound like the right one either. Her companion shrugged easily in the silence. "Oh, don't worry, it'll come to me. What's your name?" Oh, gracious, she didn't know if she could manage her own name. Why couldn't he just go away? Ylaine, she sputtered. "What? Ylaine?" He mistook her stutter for extra syllables. "Humph, is that all? Have you no other title or family name?" She shook her head again. Only title she could claim would be Princess, but surely that did not matter here in the human kingdom. She could be plain Ylaine, the human, for as long as this form lasted. "You must be poor then," the young man continued bluntly. The remark stung Ylaine. The royal coffers of Undersea made her richer than any human could ever be. She turned to hide the flush of shame and did her best to flounce away from him in a huff. This story time was read by Timothy Bateson and brought to you in conjunction with the OWSCyCon 2019. OWSCyCon runs from May 17th through May 19th. You can find us at OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. Again, OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. We have events happening across all genres. If you are a reader, you cannot afford to miss this event. You never know. You may just find your next best read.